We can dream and hope all we want along lines such as this, that God gives His truth to us simply because we ask without payment. It's a fallacy. We can also hope and dream that the Ek exists here on earth as the teachings of Eckankar simply because it happens. It doesn't just happen.
And I've noticed something interesting about today's world. The younger generations ask questions. They want to understand life for themselves. And sometimes the older generations see that as rebellion. And sometimes it's simply the soul searching. A soul trying to understand its relationship with God. And maybe that searching is not something we should fear. Maybe it's something we should respect. Because every soul is on its own spiritual journey. Each soul learns in its own time. Each person may see life and God in a different way. Spiritual understanding cannot be forced. Real understanding grows within the heart of the soul. Hello beautiful souls, my name is Beatrice and I welcome you back to my Journey Faithful Compassion Hub. On this channel I share my spiritual journey, the lessons that I'm learning, and the discoveries that have helped me grow as soul through the teachings of Eckankar. And today I want to reflect a little deeper on something very important about the spiritual journey. Just a moment, before we go further, I would like to share something special with you. I don't know how many are ready for the seminar. The seminar is this Friday, the 27th of March. It's ending on the 29th of March 2026. Seminars like this are beautiful opportunities where people come together to explore spiritual topics, share experiences, and learn more about the journey of soul. I don't think you would like to miss this opportunity. If you have ever felt curious about your spiritual path, if you have ever wondered whether there is more to life than what we see on the surface, this could be a wonderful opportunity to learn and explore. Sometimes one step on the spiritual path can open the door to a whole new understanding of life. I'm sure you would love to attend. Please see details on the flyer. You can call the number on the flyer, check the screen. Or if you are new and don't understand on the registration how to attend, please just come to the venue. I'm sure you will never want to miss this opportunity. See you there. In the previous video, we spoke about a very human moment in the life of Paul Twitchell. A moment that reminded us that spiritual growth is not about being perfect. It's about experience. It's about learning. It's about allowing soul grow through experiences.
Paul ended up in the Navy, and they assigned him to the public relations office in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. And I believe he was there for 2 years, probably until 1944. And then he was assigned ship duty, and he went down into the South Pacific to Okinawa in the Philippines. And I don't know if he ever saw action. And then he was discharged from the Navy, and then he began to write. And the early 1950s found, or actually 1946, found him back in Washington, D.C., coming aboard our Navy magazine. It was the old Navy magazine, which had been in existence since 1857 or some such date. And he signed on there. He was there for a year. And at the end of that time, the editor gave him a nice letter of commendation that said, be it known here to all, the way usual letters go in service. They won't say anything bad about you unless you've done something really bad. But he lasted a year there. And then there's a gap here. There are a lot of gaps. We'll fill them in as the months go. He ended up in Washington, D.C., married to Camille Barlow, and there he worked and came in touch with Scientology, and this was to haunt him later because the people were persistent. They kept pestering him and pestering him. And he joined other Eastern groups. He looked here and he looked there because he was in a wide open search period of his life. And so finally, at the time of his divorce, first the separation, and well, he had the experience that's recorded in the Tiger's Fang in about 1957. His marriage went on the rocks soon after that, and he got his divorce probably in 1961. But then he said he left Washington, D.C. for England because he had gotten tired of the whole artificial scene and really the social consciousness, which was going strong at this particular time. The cliffhanger was now coming forth. Paul Twitchell found himself reasserting himself as the individual, the real individual, the rugged individual, the guy who would suffer a lot simply because he wouldn't take life the way society expected to hand it to him on a platter. While he was in England, news came to him that his sister K.D. was dying back in Paducah, Kentucky, and so after a stay of maybe a half a year in England, he went to Paducah, was there about 2 months until his sister translated. And this left a great vacuum in Paul's life because he loved his sister very much. And I believe he then went up to Washington, D.C., and he sold off some of his things he had in storage. And then he went through to Des Moines, Iowa. And he met a young lady there, and she convinced him that instead of going to San Francisco, California, where he wanted to go, why not go to Seattle, Washington? And her name was Edith. And so Paul, a flesh and blood man, not a god who came walking out of the mountain highlands, he goes to Seattle because the Eck will draw us along in the way that it needs to. And many times it does through its power of love as it manifests down here through another human being. It'll take us here, it'll take us there, but it'll always take us higher if we're willing to go. And so he ends up in Seattle. He had contacts in the newspaper business. Next, he finds himself working with the Seattle Post-Intelligencer. He was there about 1 year, and then he's gone from there because I think he had about as much of that as he could stand, but he had a way out. Back in 1945, he had written a book called To Walk Alone. It hadn't sold, and he rewrote it as he did a number of others that he wrote. And he rewrote them, and some of them took years to sell. But apparently he sold it to Paramount Studios. That and another book. And so then all of a sudden his personal letters begin to reflect life on Easy Street. I don't know if this is true, we'll have to check some more. But in a number of letters he makes the same claim, that he found his gold, and he's now able to quit his job, and he's going to travel. And he traveled, he went down to Acapulco, and he stayed there a little while, and he came back up through San Francisco, visited a few Scientology friends who were up in Canada, a man who had a ranch up there. And then he took off down on a swing across the southern part of the United States, Houston, and then he went to Dallas, and then he swung back to Washington, D.C., and then he made another trip to England. And then somewhere between $150,000, if that's what he made, and it seems fairly likely, is probably equivalent today in 1984, at least $600,000 because of the inflationary factor. So he had money for a while, but he didn't have it for long. I don't know what he did with it. He was the original rebel, the cliffhanger, And if he had the money, he probably spent it, probably lent it, probably did everything with it. Because he was so sure of his ability, if he did it once, he could do it twice. And so in 1961, there come the first indications of his future position as a spiritual leader. A young lady writes to him because he had this vast knowledge of the Eastern religions. And he had this phenomenal memory. He had total recall on many of the things that he wrote. And she wanted to know more about the Eastern religions, and he told her stuff, and he says, and by the way, I'm going to send you that manuscript, and look it over, don't read it too fast. Apparently this was his Tiger's Fang manuscript. And so right around Christmas time, he wrote this letter about a month before Christmas. Right around Christmas time, apparently this lady got so going on his writings or on Paul or something, she starts banging on his door and everything else. Well, sometimes Paul had other guests at home, and other times he was busy writing or in contemplation. So he wrote her a letter. He said, I can't have you pounding on my door like this, because when I'm in a deep trance or in deep contemplation, he says, it hurts the body to come back like that. And so it was Christmas. He had also, to kind of soften the blow of his harsh words, asking for his privacy, he said, I need my privacy like other people. So he sent her a bottle of champagne. Ever the diplomat, ever the public relations person. Paul was very kind to the people who deserved it, but he also had a sharp tongue, and he was ready, willing, and able to defend himself against those people who attacked him. Well, I want to shut down here in a few minutes. We think of the God-man as eating all kinds of exotic food, but I believe the sandwich he had in Cincinnati the evening of his translation was a tuna fish sandwich and white. And then he got a doggy bag to go. One of the initiates was sitting there watching Paul up at the checkout counter in front of the cash register, and he said, well, here you are. And Cincinnati was perhaps different today, I don't know, but he said, this initiate said, quite a negative place in 1971. It was a harsh place to be. And here he is, the God-man, in his blue clothing, kind of rumpled clothes, and he's standing here counting out his pennies and nickels and dimes to pay off at the cashier. And then he goes shuffling out of the room. Just before he left, he looked at this individual. This initiate had said to him, see you tomorrow, Paul. And Paul looked at him very steadily in a peculiar way, and he said something to the effect, yes, I will. And of course then, during the seminar, after he had left the physical body, he appeared to this person because he said he would. In the case of anyone who is a spiritual leader, he reappears again to those who are his close disciples, because this is the power of a true master. This is one of the marks of a master. Not everyone will see the spiritual master after his translation, but those who are close to him will. And the stories often don't come out. And as we have these stories, I'll try to bring them out in time when we can put them together and do a good job of it. Well, then we jump to 1965. I believe this was about May. He had already begun teaching the soul travel workshops at the California Parapsychology Foundation in San Diego, California. He had gone there initially to tell the people in small workshops about bilocation. He was trying to find a word that expressed the movement of consciousness, soul going from the human state to a spiritual state, or one of the psychic states in between. And the best word he could come to then was bilocation. Later he discontinued use of the word because people were confusing it with the Padre Pio phenomenon of appearing in two different places at the same time, which Paul also did. But this isn't what he was teaching. He was teaching soul travel. The movement or the liberation of soul from the human body to walk freely in the heavens while still in the human body. This was the gift he was leaving to us. Well, not everybody could get to the workshop, and so pretty soon people said, by word of mouth, they said, "Hey, Paul, could you write this down in a letter?" And this was the beginning of the Eck Discourses. And so the Eck Discourses were a reflection of what Paul was doing at the time. If he was teaching soul travel, it came out soul travel. And each time you can see an evolution in his writing from his beginning works as he advanced, as he was able to give out more of the truth to the people as they grew in understanding of what the Mahanta consciousness always was and always had been. We have become accustomed to the story that by some devious means, the first board of trustees had pulled the wool over Paul's eyes, or he was too kind, or something of this nature, to prevent them from establishing Eckankar as a non-profit organization. But this wasn't true. Even before he approached the first person who later became a board member, who was also an attorney, Paul had been in discussion with his own attorney, someone who wasn't an Eck, and the attorney told him if Paul and Gail would translate at the same time, the future of Eck would be in jeopardy. It wouldn't stand. All that was there then to carry on the work in 1969 were a few office workers. It needed continuity. And so at this time, the attorney recommended that Paul make it the Eckankar Foundation. Later, of course, as he saw the need for change, it became the nonprofit organization. But the foundation was nonprofit because he knew that if he left, there had to be a financial stability, because if there wasn't, when he went, the teachings of Eck would go too. We can dream and hope all we want along lines such as this, that God gives his truth to us simply because we ask without payment. It's a fallacy. We can also hope and dream that the Eck exists here on earth as the teachings of Eckankar simply because it happens. It doesn't just happen. It takes a lot of planning, and it takes a lot of work, hard work. And so it takes work by you, and it takes work by me. We take a checklist, an inventory of our talents, and then when the influence of the Eck comes into us, where it says, you cannot live in peace, at peace with yourself, unless you give out my blessings to the world. When this wisdom or knowledge comes to you, you somehow have to serve the Eck. You have to carry forth this message in a little way, in some kind of a way. Because this is the truth that Eck is love, and that there isn't any truth unless we know that Eck is love. And if Eck is love, there is a way for us to put our forces together, individually and collectively, and to bring forth the message of Eck to all the people in this world who are ready to hear it. Thank you very much. Baraka Bashar.
When we listen to the talks about Paul Twitchell, sometimes we imagine a spiritual master who appeared fully formed, already enlightened, and already ready. But when we look closely at his life, we see something different. You see a soul who searched, a soul who explored many paths, a soul who struggled, asked many questions, and faced life changes just like many of us. And I think this is something very important to understand, because sometimes people think if you are truly spiritual, life should always be smooth. But that is not always the case. Many times the soul grows through experiences, through searching, through questioning, through moments where we feel uncertain. Paul explored different teachings. He studied spiritual ideas from different traditions. He observed the world around him. He asked questions. And slowly through the teaching, something deeper began to unfold. Eventually, he began sharing spiritual insights about the nature of soul, the inner world, and the possibility of experiencing the light and sound of God. This teaching later became the foundation of Eckankar. But what touches me the most about this story is not just about the teachings, it is the journey. Because it shows us that every soul is learning, every soul is evolving. And sometimes the very things we think are delays in our lives are actually preparing us for something very meaningful. And this brings me to something very personal. There was a time in my life I was afraid to ask questions about religion, afraid to say what I really thought, afraid that people would judge me or think I'm losing my faith. Because many of us grew up believing that questioning means doubt. But sometimes questioning is actually the beginning of understanding. Sometimes the question you are afraid to ask is the very question that begins your spiritual awakening. And when I look at the life of Paul Twitchell, I see a soul who was not afraid to search. He explored, he asked, and through that searching, something deeper unfolded. And I've noticed something interesting about today's world. The younger generations ask questions. They want to understand life for themselves. And sometimes the older generations see that as rebellion. And sometimes it's simply the soul searching. A soul trying to understand its relationship with God. And maybe that searching is not something we should fear. Maybe it's something we should respect. Because every soul is on its own spiritual journey. Each soul learns in its own time. Each person may see life and God in a different way. Spiritual understanding cannot be forced. Real understanding grows within the heart of the soul. That is something I deeply appreciate about spiritual freedom that I discovered through Eckankar, a path that encourages each person to explore their own direct experience with the light and sound of God. And thank you for spending this moment with me. Remember, soul is always learning, growing, and moving closer to the light. Please don't forget to like, share this message. There might be someone waiting to hear this kind of a message or hungry for this message. Please don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this. I love you all. May the light and sound of God be guide your path.